Hi, welcome to the 2022 Latinx Kidlit Book Festival. I'm Marcia Mickelson. I'm a young adult author, and this panel is called Hijas más Chingonas, Stories of Young Women Doing Powerful Things. Whether it's standing up for their communities, their families, or themselves, young Latinas can turn to these books to see stories of empowerment. And we are so pleased to have 4 young adult authors joining us here today. We have Francesca Padilla, Debbie Rigaud, Lilliam Rivera, and Natalia Sylvester. And they're here to talk to us about their stories of young women and why they write about them. So I think we'll go ahead and start with Natalia. If you could just introduce yourself a little bit and tell us about your book.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name's Natalia, obviously. I'm a Peruvian American author of YA books and also books for adults. And my latest, Breathe and Count Back from 10, is about Vero. She is 17. She is Peruvian American. She was born with hip dysplasia, like me. She's had many surgeries growing up. And this all takes place the summer before her senior year of high school, in which she decides to audition to become a professional mermaid at her local theme park, all at the same time that she's falling in love for the first time, navigating her immigrant parents' expectations, and just really trying to feel safe in her own body.
Thank you. Lilliam?
Hi, I'm Lilliam Rivera, and my latest novel is called We Light Up the Sky. It is an alien invasion story set in Los Angeles and centered around 3 brown LA natives who are, questioning whether or not they should save the world. So, yeah, that's my book.
All right. And Francesca?
Hi, I'm Francesca Padilla, and I am a young adult contemporary realistic author who has just debuted a book called What's Coming to Me from Soho Teen, which is an imprint of Soho Press. It came out just this past August, 2022. And it is about a girl named Minerva Gutierrez, or Minerva Gutierrez. I don't know. It is about a girl named Minerva who has sort of been stranded by her life circumstances. Her mom's been in the hospital a lot, and she's sort of isolated in this town, this fictional town on Long Island, and kind of like The Great Gatsby, but with poor people. And it is, and she's sort of stuck at this job. The kind of only thing she's got going on is this job at an ice cream stand that turns out to be really corrupt, and her boss is abusive. And so the book is about how all these issues in her life come together. She sort of uses the corruptness of the ice cream stand as a way to possibly get out of her life circumstances and get back at her boss, and makes all sorts of bad decisions, learns all sorts of great lessons. And so it's sort of a mix of coming of age and mystery.
Thank you, Francesca. And Debbie?
Hi, everyone. I'm Debbie Rigaud. I'm a YA author. Also have middle grade as well. But my latest came out this month. Is A Girl's Guide to Love and Magic, which is YA. It follows Cicely. Cicely is a 15-year-old Haitian American. It's actually her birthday, and she's excited. It lands on the same day as the West Indian American Day Parade in Brooklyn. But plans veer off when she attends a psychic reading with her aunt, and then her aunt gets seemingly possessed by a voodoo spirit. And so Cicely is in charge of her aunt, and along with her crush and her friend, they have to kind of figure out what to do and how to unpossess the aunt. And it sort of takes on a life of a scavenger hunt, and the setting is the West Indian American Day Parade. So it was a lot of fun to write.
Well, and I had the pleasure of reading all of your books, so thank you for that. Before we get started, I just want to remind everyone to please read the anti-harassment policy in the chat box, and don't forget to subscribe to the Latinx Kidlit Book Festival's YouTube page. And if you are a school, classroom, librarian, or educator joining us, please enter our chat, our classroom book set giveaway. You can find the link to the entry form in the chat. So I'm going to start off with a question for all of us, and we can just continue in that order that we did before. Why do you think it's important to get these kinds of stories with themes around empowering young women into the hands of teens? So we'll start with Natalia.
Thank you. I think we live in a world that's constantly wanting to have a say over our bodies, our futures, what we do, what we don't do. And there's all these voices, especially like in Vero's case, because she is disabled, she's a Latina, she's an immigrant. She's trying to kind of she's struggling with she's encountering all these voices of xenophobia and machismo and ableism, and she's made to feel ashamed for her body constantly, whether it's because of the scars she carries from her surgeries or the ways that she walks, or whether it's because she's finally stepping into her own sexuality and her parents don't approve. And it all amounts to shame. And I don't want any of us to have to keep carrying that shame. We have to reject it because it holds us back. And how else do we live our fullest, truest lives if we don't reject that?
Lilliam?
So, I love writing different types of books, and I'm obsessed with alien invasion stories. I watched Nope 500 times already, and so I've always wanted to write my own interpretation of what an alien invasion story is, because most of the time these stories or these movies center around white males who end up saving the day, and they never really talk about the people who actually live in these neighborhoods, what would happen to them. And so then I just, I knew that my three characters, Luna, Pedro, and Rafa, who aren't friends or who attend the same school, would find the way of connecting with each other through this, epic moment in time in their, when an alien lands and takes the form of Luna's cousin or deceased cousin. And so it was just this idea of who would save us, right? I feel like I wouldn't be turning to Tom Cruise if an alien would land. He would be the person that I would be running away from. And so I just know that I'm going to be looking for the people who are in my neighborhood, my family, my people, and see where we're going to end up. And so I really want to kind of explore this idea and also just explore this idea of the city as the city itself being not welcoming to these young people who live there, who grew up there, who are raised there, not willing to protect them. And so how do you navigate that? How do these three young people navigate that world, especially in a time of crisis? And so, I'm really into we all seen it, how our young people are in the forefront of overcoming these huge obstacles, are in the forefront of being outspoken and leaders in movements. So that's why I'm going to be going where the kids are. If anything happens, that's where I'll be. So it was really good and kind of challenging as well to write this book. But I love these kind of books, so it was perfect.
Thank you. And Debbie?
The theme of empowering and looking to teens, and also looking to teens who have to resist, sort of like Natalia says, feeling ashamed about something that just comes naturally to them or something that they were born into, is of particular interest to me, because Cicely is questioning some of the choices that her family members are making. Her mother is traditional Catholic. Her aunt is going in more of a spiritual tradition sense, and so she's interrogating, well, why is one more shameful than the other? And in this time, having empower stories, I think, is so important, because it's so easy for us to tap into sort of what everyone is thinking at any moment of the day. We could just read Twitter. And so as you're coming of age, just to know everyone's thoughts, it kind of can flood you. And when you meet someone that is authentic and knows how to tap into their authentic self, it's kind of amazing. And just reminding teens that, Cicely, for example, is 15. Anyone like who has 15 years on a job has experience. So 15 years of life experience says a lot. And so those moments where teens could feel like following the herd or whatever, stories that are empowering to them could be an inspirational source to sort of remind them that, no, let me check in with myself before anything, and let that be my guide a lot of the times. And so that's really what I want to convey in writing this.
Thank you, Debbie. And Francesca?
So I really resonate with pretty much every answer so far, and have a lot of similar things to say about agency and how it is just consistently and casually stripped from us as women, as people of color, as Latina people, as immigrants, as and pretty much at this point, everybody it has experienced having their agency stripped away bit by bit, and in different ways, like physically, emotionally, bureaucratically. In my book, the main character, Minerva, or Min, pretty much everywhere she goes she's having her agency threatened, at least in some way. At home, like her mom is barely there because she's been hospitalized, she's been left alone. At school, she is told that she is in danger of being expelled because, things that aren't her fault. At work, her boss is abusive. And so I think that it's important to show these things happening, because so many teens, especially teens who are low income or of color, like they just experience this at every turn, and having their agency and their childhood like threatened all the time. So I think that it's important for us to see that this is happening all over the place. But the other thing that I wanted to talk about is, or really briefly, is apathy is something that we are threatened with all the time. Like, I think that teens are incredibly resilient, and they are the most in jeopardy of being apathetic. And I think that we need constant reminders of ways to overcome that or prevent that. And I think that showing characters attempting and, maybe failing, but also triumphing, I'm not sure if that's a word, but like overcoming that, we need to see that too, because apathy is a real killer, and it's pervasive and effective because it's so quiet. And I've seen kids really kind of not, in the work that I've done so far with teenagers, like they're seeing apathy everywhere they go, but that they still persist. And so we need to see as many examples of that as possible in our media.
Thank you so much for your answers. I feel like all of you are touching on themes that teens are facing today. This next question is for Natalia. Natalia, in your book, Breathe and Count Back from 10, what is Veronica's journey towards self-empowerment?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. Like on the surface, she is auditioning to become a mermaid at her local theme park where, underwater performers put on a tail and they dance underwater, and she has grown up dreaming about being one of them, and suddenly they have auditions. But it's not so simple for her to just audition, because her parents have a very strict idea of what the American dream is for her. And not only that, but she is disabled and she has hip dysplasia. So they have, they're very overprotective of her and her body, and then at the same time, she's kind of falling for the new guy, the new kid who just moved in next, into her neighborhood, and they are very strict about that as well, about whether she should be dating. And it all comes back to what Francesca was saying, which is really about agency, about like, will she decide to audition anyways? Will she let go of the expectations, really, that not only her parents, but really everyone around her has, because they think that because she's disabled, that her body can exist in this very narrow space, when she's the one who knows all the boundaries and all the potential, all the truths of her body. Like, she's the one who wants to have the say. So I think a lot of her journey is more about letting go of those expectations, about claiming that space, saying, I have the right, and to decide and set my own terms. I never wanted this to be a story about Vero having to accept her body, or it as if she were at war with it, because I never grew up at war with my body. Where I felt that clash was with the rest of the world, and how the world viewed my body and treated my body. And so it's really more about how the world around her has to change, and her realizing that, she doesn't have to change for their narrow views of her, and to conform to that.
This next question is for Lilliam. Your books, Never Look Back and We Light Up the Sky, they both deal with supernatural themes, and both of your protagonists, Yuri and Luna, they had to contend with these supernatural forces. How did you use this to show how young women can do powerful things?
I love scary stuff. And so both Yuri in Never Look Back and Luna in We Light Up the Sky, they're both dealing with, almost it feels like ghosts, right? Like people from their past in a strange way. They're having to confront their past. And although within We Light Up the Sky, it's a even more violent kind of expression, in the sense that the alien is sort of cosplaying as her dead cousin. So it's a real kind of messed up kind of situation, where these two young women, Latinas, are having to just really kind of confront maybe past histories, past mistakes that they might have, had with with whatever it is, their evil spirits, or or this kind of alien representing this kind of like past of hers. So, I mean, for me, I'm tackling kind of these things of regret in a lot of ways, like the regret of past mistakes, but also like a redemption moments, for both of these characters in a lot of ways, and redemption in different ways, like in leaning into the violence, and also like into also into the destruction of things, So I kind of love that kind of playing around with that aspect of a young woman's life, of it being not very clear or clean cut kind of way of living. It's very much about incorporating all types of different aspects of being a human. And that could really kind of play around in regret, in shame, in violence. And, I love kind of exploring this aspect of maybe even loving violence in a lot of ways. So that, I don't know, that to me is interesting. It's just interesting because, we're growing up, and I know what Natalia was mentioning, like these kind of like imposed idea of what your life should be as a Latina. And I love to explore the different aspects of that it's not just one rule or one guide of how you are to live this life. This life is very much working in the grays, not in the black and whites. So I hope with these two characters who are very, very, very different, but I hope with these two characters that I'm exploring those aspects of what it means to be a woman in this world, you know, and kind of like breaking down this kind of like imposed ideas of what you're supposed to do. Yeah.
I think that's so important because there's nothing clear cut about being a teen. Francesca, in your book, What's Coming to Me, Minerva has to face a lot of adversity. And at times during the book, I felt like she was alone in facing these challenges. Can you talk about what the things she had to do to stand up for herself?
Yeah, so she is definitely going through a lot. I get a lot of feedback, or I witness a lot of feedback of people being like, "Oh my gosh, she's really going through, like, this is so sad." And I get a little bit not triggered, but I the first thing that comes to mind is this is something that what Minerva goes through is something that teenagers everywhere, children everywhere deal with on an everyday basis. So, as I said already, she's been stranded because of her mother's illness, chronic, serious illness. She's in jeopardy at school. She, manages to keep a job to get a job to keep herself financially afloat. But that turns out to be a horrible environment. So really, at every turn, she's been failed by adults and society. And so in almost every scene, she has to, or she feels like she has to fend for herself. And sometimes it is totally out of necessity and just something that she has to do, point out how abusive her boss is. She turns out to be one of the only people who actually points it out. That's a big part of her personality, is that she actually says what's going on around her, and she's angry, and then she has to deal with people being like, "Why are you so angry? Like, just deal with it." But that's the only way that she knows how to fight back, is to actually point things out, and sometimes it's misguided, and sometimes it's just total survival instinct, and other times it's warranted, like when she fights back against her boss. And so, yeah, the book ultimately shows her navigating these different responses to her circumstances in both healthy and unhealthy and sort of morally gray ways. So the healthy ways being she learns to reach out to friends, to address her trauma out loud. Unhealthy, substance use, violence. I really resonated with what Lilliam said just now about like violence and how interesting it is, and how important it is to look at it in not just like, oh, it's good or bad kind of way. But for men, she does act out in violence and unhealthy ways, and then pushing people away, pushing things away. And then the in-between, which is getting revenge on a person who's truly terrible and represents the worst of society and white supremacy. Yeah, I'm not sure if I answered that question directly, but those were my thoughts.
Yeah, I think so. Because that was the thing I always felt when I was reading the book. Like, she's by herself, even against her friends. Sometimes she has to stand up for herself. And so,
right.
Thanks for going into that. Debbie, in your books, Truly, Lovely, Royally, and A Girl's Guide to Love and Magic, they both talk about the importance of one's community. Can you tell us a little bit more about the importance of community in a young woman's life? And were your characters called to stand up for their community?
Yeah, I love talking about community because the communities that I wrote about are communities that have been only shown in one lens, through one lens. And so the communities in the stories are communities that are marginalized communities that are often viewed, maybe say on the news, like I know somebody that said, "Oh, you're from East Orange, New Jersey. I've seen it on the news." And I'm like, well, there's a lot of things that go on in my hometown. Love also lives there. Joy also lives there. Yeah, there's definitely violence and things like that, but there's also another side to the city. So there is in A Girl's Guide to Love and Magic, Cicely's world is this sort of immigrant community, and it shapes her. Living in the immigrant community shapes her, in so many ways. And when you're growing up around, when you're exposed from a young age to different cultures, and a community that vibrant, different languages, it definitely shapes you and your connection to other people, and that's evident in Sicily. So her friends are from different walks of life and different communities, different, especially particularly Caribbean backgrounds, Latinx backgrounds, and so I just wanted to portray how enriching growing up in an environment like that is, and to show a story that is from our point of view about a community. So it's always a lot of fun to write, because I populate the book with all the characters that you see on the streets, the different things that they say. There's this one character that was particularly fun to write, because he knows you from generations ago, so he's calling you by your grandmother's name, so it's all in there, and hopefully in a very sensory way you can experience it on the pages, and particularly this event that the book is written around, which is one of the largest, if not the largest, parade in New York City, and it happens on Labor Day coming soon. And it's a time where, everyone pulls out a flag and represents, and it doesn't diminish you when I'm talking about my people. It's almost like the culture of, being on the dance floor and somebody is feeling the music, and we're just gonna be like, go Francesca, because we love when you are feeling yourself. This is your moment where you're feeling yourself. So we're supporting that. It's not diminishing me, you being out there flexing, or just having a moment. It's actually hyping me up. And so I wanted to convey that this is the world that Sicily comes from, and you can see how it shapes her in her interaction with her space around her and the people around her. And it was fun to write about the parade. There's a stigma attached to the parade that happens before the West Indian Day Parade. It is the Juve that happens in the middle of the night, and it's a more macabre scene. Did I say that word right? Macabre scene, where you might have people slathered in paint, black paint, white paint, wearing horns. It's like, she's told not to go there, but they have to go there because they have to find a priestess there to depossess their aunt. And it's scary, and it was amazing to write that. It was amazing to write those more scarier, edge of your seat moments. But I'm also showing that, look, here, these people slathered in paint, coming in your face, scaring you or screaming. They're expressing something that is in all of us, but they're expressing it in a place, in an environment where they can express it, And if you look at it, how different is it than the people at the ball games wearing slathered in paint, wearing all this and shouting and screaming? Why is that okay? And this is all taboo. So you get to see, once you come into the community and once you feel a part of the community and feel the love that the narrator and the character has for the community, then you view these other scenes, these darker scenes, in a new light, pun intended. So that's what the effect that being part of the community has on you.
Thank you. I love you pointing out that, it's not just what you see on TV, that there's joy to be found there, and all these wonderful aspects of community. Natalia, there's a passage in your book that really spoke to me personally, and I think speaks to a lot of children of immigrants. And that is when Veronica asks herself, am I doing enough to justify what her parents, gave up to come here? And that's something I felt and have questioned a lot in myself as well. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I've been so not surprised, but just feeling very seen, because that a lot of people have told me a similar thing about that passage. And that passage really came about. There's a scene where Vero is hesitating whether or not she'll be auditioning for the mermaid park, and her best friend Leslie is an amazing supportive cheerleader, and she's also white, and she was born in the US, and so there are parts of Vero's experience that she can't understand. And so Leslie's like, yeah, she can't really see why Vero's hesitating, because she's like, this is something you've dreamed about. But the thing is that in Vero's world, like her parents, you know, she grew up knowing that her parents sacrificed so much for her to be here. She grew up knowing that they came to this country for her to have, you know, a so-called better future and more opportunities than they did. And also, you know, they sometimes make comments about her obsession with the mermaids. They'll call them like tonterías y fantasías, as if it's all a fantasy. And there's a lot that I think that is either spoken or unspoken in our communities that we internalize. And like, I know for me, there were times that if there was an adult in my life whose opinion I really cared about and who was in a place of authority, and I could have had something that I was deeply passionate about, but if they so much as like frowned at it, it would kind of make me shrink in embarrassment and shame for it. You know, I wasn't as quick to just step in and say, no, this is what I want. And I think it's because of that pressure, you know, of saying like, yeah, we are carrying our parents or grandparents or ancestors' hopes and dreams into this future, right? And we are supposed to be the ones to have a better future, but who is measuring it? Like, by whose standards is better, right? And so depending on who gets to have a say in that, we can often feel really guilty for deciding to measure that on our own terms. And so I think I really wanted to explore and reimagine what that could look like for Vero in this story. To think about like, okay, so maybe her parents never imagined her becoming a mermaid when they, you know, decided to give up everything in their home country and come to a new place. But can those things coexist? Like, can we honor the sacrifices that those before us came while also honoring our own truths and living our own truths? And if anything, it's like, if they did this very courageous thing in coming to this unknown country, right? Aren't we also being courageous in stepping into this new territory of our own dreams, of our own unimagined or yet to be reimagined future? And so, yeah, I think that's really where I was trying to go with that, but really trying to acknowledge also how incredibly difficult it is. Because it's, like I said, it's not always spoken. And so much of the weight of Vero's parents' expectations is often kind of silent. Like, they never outright punish her in specific terms. They never say, you are grounded for 2 weeks and you won't have your phone. You know, like, I grew up also being like, man, that seems manageable. Like, I would see my friends and they'd have these very set terms. And you know, for us, sometimes it's a little more vague, and but it's still silent and heavy. Like, we feel it. And it really is very much, at least the way I experienced it, wrapped up in that unspoken expectation of being the ones who are also responsible for carrying on these hopes into the future.
Thank you, Natalia. Reading that scene, like, really, I really felt that. So we've got a couple minutes left before we start our student questions. So the next few questions, we could just keep it to like maybe a minute so we can get into those student questions. Lilliam, and we see important themes in We Light Up the Sky. Luna and her cousin Tasha have a very close relationship. Can you talk about the importance of cousin relationships in Latinx families?
Oh gosh, I love this question because I mean, I don't know about you, but I grew up with my cousins and we were up to no good. It was always like, and they were always older. So I was always like looking up to them, or it was just adventures all the time. Like, you were going to hang out at someone's house and it was like, I'm a sleepover. And it was always like, it was up to like, yeah, it really was about this serious love and deep love that till this day, I don't see them because I live in LA, but when I do see them, we revert right back to that time. We revert right back to like the fact that they still call me cousin it because my hair was very long. That, I mean, still to this day, they're still ragging me. So there's something about cousin love that's just like, it's just, you have to be able to capture that because it's so real when it comes to my family.
And Francesca, in your author's note at the end of the book, you talk about grief. Minerva's experiences a lot of grief. Can you talk about the effects that grief can have on adolescents?
Sure. So just a quick trigger warning for, grief, death, and dying. So the type of grief I talk about in my author's note specifically, I pointed out in my author's note, and I talk about, and I explore it in the book. It's called anticipatory grief. And it's the kind of grief that we experience when we know ahead of time that somebody in our life is going to pass away. For example, if they have a very serious illness, like Minerva's mom. And so grief, it really changes us. It changes everything around us. It kind of colors our whole experience of the world once it's in our lives. And so for Minerva, what happens with her mom, it really destabilizes her materially because she's, like alone in her apartment until a cousin comes in, and, that's part of the book as well. But it also bleeds into her relationships, her education, and her overall mental health, and the way that she is dealing with her life, and in ways that could really create long-term damage. And so one of the messages of the book, I think, is that it's important to acknowledge and name grief and to normalize death more in society, so that when we're faced with it, it's less of a shock to the system.
Okay, this last question is for Debbie, and then we have our student questions. And A Girl's Guide to Life and Magic, and even in Simone Breaks All the Rules, your main characters' strong cultural identities are tied to their missions to empower themselves. Can you explain how or why?
First of all, I just love everyone's answers just now. Everything resonated with me with what you all were saying. But yes, so I had a moment. But yeah, she is, like I mentioned, Cicely has strong cultural ties to because of how she grew up, and the West Indian American Day Parade is about cultural pride. But she is someone who interrogates things. So she examines. She has a natural curiosity about things that are supernatural, things that maybe what some would consider taboo, like voodoo and maybe tarot card reading. Her aunt is a sort of an influencer on Instagram, and I was inspired by some of those that I've seen on Instagram, sort of just wearing their voodoo knowledge on their sleeves and coming out, and it was very different a generation ago than it is now. And so that lets her know when something befalls her, when this happens, when her aunt is possessed, it's sort of like a spiritual malpractice happens. She realizes she has no idea what to do because nothing was passed down. And so faced with this, and turning to her friends who were in similar situations, and she has a bestie who's very sort of religious and maybe not into this as much as Cicely is, but they don't know where to turn. So they do like a random Google search to find out how to unpossess. If you're possessed by a spirit, what to do. And it's kind of an embarrassing thing to her at the same time, because she's been made to feel that she shouldn't ask questions, or she should be ashamed. And here now she's got a situation that's fallen in her lap that's very culturally a lot that's very tied into her culture, in a sense, to some in her culture, and she has no idea what to do. And so it was really tough to write for me, because I'm Haitian American, and a lot of Haitians want to distance themselves from voodoo. And so in particular, my family, which they run a more, religious, Catholic religious and everything like that. And so it was sort of like, well, why are you writing about that? And I had to kind of sort of tap into Cicely's strength and say, I'm going to move forward with this. And I too included an author's note, all because of like my paranoia in writing it. And I was very careful with how I approached it. It's definitely not proselytizing or anything. And it's sort of like what Natalia was saying about how you can honor, your ancestors or your generation before, while going your own path. And then maybe there's a way that we can do both in a sense, to a certain extent. And so I wrote an author's note to sort of explain my process. It was difficult to write at times because of just those thoughts of like, okay, is lightning going to strike me because I'm writing about this that my family doesn't want me to write about? But in the end, I'm grateful for their support.
Thank you. And now we have our first student question.
When you were younger, did you always know you wanted to be an author?
I definitely did not always know I wanted to be an author. I was always writing though. So I feel like I need to distinguish between the two things because I knew I loved to write. I just didn't know it was a possibility for me. And I think it's because I didn't really grow up having access to a lot of authors who looked like me and were telling stories that reflected myself. Like I didn't see me or my family in stories. And so I just thought maybe that means that my stories don't matter as much, which is a really horrible thing to grow up feeling. But I was very lucky that when I went to college, I had amazing creative writing professors who encouraged me to keep writing and also to write the stories that I wanted to tell and that reflected my family and my community. And I was also really lucky. I think in high school, we had a Latina author come to do a speaking engagement in our school. It was my first time seeing an author, and like, what amazing luck that she was Latina. And I was just kind of like, oh my God, we can be authors, So I just carried that with me. And I feel, I'm just grateful that over time it became something that I imagined was possible for me and that I decided to go after.
I'll just answer. It was, I knew I was going to be a writer like Natalia. I always used to write, but I thought I was going to take the journalism route because I was in the school newspaper. And I did. I spent a lot of my first half of my career just being a journalist, an entertainment journalist, a fashion journalist. And then it took a moment for me to decide to become an author. But I knew writing was going to be it because that's my gift.
Same background as Lilliam, as mine. Yeah, writing first, always. I felt like I wasn't as much of a reader as I was a writer.
I can pinpoint the exact moment. My third grade teacher gave me an assignment back and was like, "You're a really good writer." And I was like, "I'm a really good writer." And I just kept writing and kept wanting and really early on knew I wanted to write books.
And I think we have another student question.
Is there an age limit when you're an author, or can you go until you're 102? Do you retire?
I'm going to go ahead and say no. There's no age limit. I hope that I will be writing as long as I want to, and I wouldn't, as long as it's bringing me joy, I'm going to keep writing. So.
I think Judy Blume is still writing. I mean, she has a bookstore. Like, if Judy Blume is still out here, then I'm going to still be out here.
Yes, no age limit. In fact, I know some authors that are starting, after retirement. So, yeah.
There's no age limit, but I personally may not want to be writing I'll be writing. I might not be publishing at 100.
And we have one.
Okay, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, sir.
I was like, please tell me I'm not going to be on TikTok when I'm 100.
We just have one last student question.
Okay. So Auden W, grade 12, said, how do you choose who you're going to write about? That's the biggest mystery for me. I mean, it's changed for every book, but definitely for Breathe and Count Back from 10, I knew that I wanted to write about a girl like me who was born in Peru with hip dysplasia and had come to the US very young. And there's always like a jumping off point that I feel like I want to start reimagining my characters as their own people. And so, and then see who they become. Like, even if I have a lot in common with them, like, see who they become throughout the course of the story. So for me, with Vero, it was like that moment where she starts becoming a mermaid, because I never got to be a mermaid. And that's really when I got to decide, or explore who she was.
It's usually an image that appears and it starts haunting me. And then that image, I keep asking questions. Who is it? What do they want? What do they like? What kind of music do they listen to? And then that's just the beginning of if that image just keeps coming back and I keep talking about it, then that's meant to be something, whether that's a short story or a whole novel.
I love that. For me, it's always the premise that comes clear, and then the character grows from there. Like then I attach the character to the premise, and then, like Natalia, I have to wait for the character to develop and get a sense of who that person is.
Yeah, it just sort of comes to me, no pun intended. What's coming to me? So it just. I don't know where I get, they just come to me. And I think like a couple people have said, I just follow the good vibes. If it's really exciting to me and it brings out the passion in me, then I just follow it. And once I identify that, then it's very easy to sort of step into a character and discover things about them. It's very hard to describe, but it's fun. And it's not my preferred way, but it is how I am.
Well, thank you everyone for spending this time with me. I felt like I could relate to something every one of you said, in your book, or the answers that you gave. In some way I could really relate to everything, and I'm sure that other people will relate as well to your books. And I just wanted to give a quick mention. My book is called Where I Belong. It's about a young woman who's an immigrant from Guatemala, which is where I'm from. And so that's why I could feel like I could relate to a lot of the things that you were talking about in your books, and immigrant families and different things like that. And so thank you so much for sharing this time with us. And I'm sure that hopefully a lot of students out there also can relate to the themes in your book and the different things that you talk about, as far as, not having like the financial stability, or not having the resources available, the feelings of community, feelings of, being an immigrant. So we appreciate for the time that you all had to spend with us today. And this has been, thank you for attending the panel. It's Hijas Más Chingonas, Stories of Young Women Doing Powerful Things. And thank you so much for your time and for being here with us during this panel.